Hi, this is Greg Greene with Chthonica, the show about horror in all its fictional forms. And on today's episode, we'll learn about the literary lineage of one of the brightest stars in the firmament of American fiction. You know him because of his work on books like, of course, My Heart is a Chainsaw, comic books like Earth Divers, and even his regular column in Fangoria called Slasher Nation. And then coming up just a few days around when this podcast goes live, the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, Don't Fear the Reaper, that's coming out on February 7, 2023. We're so excited to have Stephen Graham-Jones here on the show. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
Man, thanks for having me, Greg. I'm happy to be here. Thrilled to talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, I've had a couple of episodes where I've talked to some favorite authors of mine about stories that made a big impact on them and helped to shape who they became as writers. And I asked you for a couple of stories, and you gave me, they aren't really horror specifically, they're not genre, I guess you'd call it literary fiction, though both of them have some very strong elements that are pretty shocking. You gave me two stories, The Prophet from Jupiter by Tony Earley, that was published in Harper's Magazine 1993, and also Lawns by Mona Simpson, published first in the Iowa Review 1984. Now, when did you first read these two stories?
I read Prophet from Jupiter whichever Best American it came out in, which would have been the year after its publication. I'm guessing that must have been, when did you say it came out? When did
93, so yeah, probably 94.
Probably 94. And actually, Louise Erdrich edited one of those annuals right around that time. It could have been hers. I don't know. But yeah, that's where I found that story. And as for Lawns, I found that story. I was working on my PhD at Florida State University, and I had to take a literature course for some requirement. And I took a course called GAPS, GAPS, from David Kirby, a poet. And what we were doing in that class was navigating the spaces between kind of story units or story blocks, like even between sentences, like how do you know how far to jump, and how do you know when you can take the reader with you and what the reader's going to like and all that kind of stuff. And we only read 2 books for that whole semester, those 16 weeks. One of them was Peter Brooks's Psychoanalysis and Storytelling, which I still like a lot, and the other was not a book, it was this story, Lawns. Every day for 2 times a week for 16 weeks we talked about Lawns. And
oh my goodness,
yeah, it was a great time.
That is amazing. So both of them were really part of the college experience for you.
They were, yeah. Well, I mean, with Best American, I wasn't necessarily being assigned those as textbooks. I guess this would have come out when I was at the very end of my undergraduate degree. But I was inhaling every Best American I could find on the used shelf, on anywhere. I wanted to just know what mattered, and so I was reading all those books. And
wow.
And I found The Prophet from Jupiter, and I think I followed that to Tony Earley has another story called We Are Charlotte about pro wrestling, which is just amazing. It's amazing in the same way that Prophet from Jupiter is amazing to me. And he did a collection, So This Is Heaven, I believe. And yeah, he was doing stuff I really liked right around that time.
Well, tell us about The Prophet from Jupiter. I mean, it's a remarkable story. And, yeah. and we'll talk a little bit later. I think you'll see trace some of its impact on your fictional worlds just a little bit. But tell us what happens essentially in the story.
The Prophet from Jupiter, it gets its title from one of the characters who is a real estate developer gone kind of, I don't know what you'd call him. He thinks he's a prophet anyways. Maybe he is a prophet. We don't know. He's from Jupiter, Florida, and he's moved up to, what is it, North Carolina? Is that right?
Lake Glen, North Carolina is what it has become. What it originally was a town called Jory between 2 mountains.
Yeah. And so he's up there proselytizing and making ladderback miniature chairs while his wife makes bullwhips and they sell them. But that's just he's one small element of the story. The story is really about a dam keeper in his last moments of dam keeping, pretty much. He's not being chased from town, but he is going to leave town. His wife has had an affair. She's pregnant with the police chief's kid. And there's 2 ways that I read The Prophet from Jupiter. The first way is there's enough information in this, what is it, probably a 16-page story to really fill a novel. There's enough stuff going on to fill a novel. It's really, really condensed. And I feel like the story is the water in the dam that's pushing harder and harder on the dam until it's going to burst at the end, And another way I think about this story is it's from an old thing I read in Discover Magazine, I believe it was, about, how when you're in a car accident or any kind of accident, time kind of slows down for you and you can remember stuff differently. Like I was reading about an experiment where they, took 40 or 80 or whatever undergrad volunteers and stood them on the edge of like a pit with foam in it, and they would show them flashcards really quickly. And as they were showing them, they would push them back into the pit, so they're falling as they're looking at these flashcards. And the control group was just being shown the flashcards in a seminar room or something. And they found that the people who were falling as they looked at the flashcards could remember which flashcards went where so much better than the people at the table could. And I feel like that's what's happening here. This guy is in his very last moments of his life, not his life, but his life as he's known it, and he's falling back into some vast void he doesn't have a sense of, really, the future, like all of us. And as he falls, he's just taking so many snapshots of his town. He's relaying the history of it to us. And so many of these paragraphs in this story, there will be like 4 threads and there's no transition between them. They're just jammed up against each other. And if I had this story in text, I've always wanted to tease it out and like do the Junie line and do the dam bursting like thread and just see. I feel like this is 4 or 5 kind of 1,200 word stories that have been layered together.
Well, one of the major parts of the story is that his wife, Elizabeth, who's cheated on him, who doesn't want really anything to do with them, and the narrator's never named, he's just the dam keeper. But his wife Elizabeth continues to, her narrative gets injected into the story all throughout, and interrupts his flow of like the historical view of the town of Jory underneath. She really haunts the story, but you'll just get details about her in the middle of a completely different narrative.
Yeah, it feels almost as if it's not just that she's his touchstone, she's his like compulsion. Like he can't stop thinking about number one, you and I never had a child. Number two, you're having a child with the police chief now, and we're still provisionally married or maybe splitting up, or I don't know how that's working. And it's almost like, maybe that's a third way to read it, is that he really just wants to talk about his wife, but he's disguising it with all this other stuff, but it surfaces nevertheless, I love the visual we get of him. He doesn't ever do the stupid thing of I looked in the bathroom mirror and my eyebrows were like this and my hair was like, that kind of stuff. But he does talk over and over about his beard. It's long, it's down to his middle of his chest. And of course, beards, traditionally have been like a symbol or a sign of virility, and virility is what he's like, feels like he's failing at, because he couldn't father a child. Yeah,
that's right. There seems to be a real strong sense of kind of loss of virility, loss of I guess identity. Like the town used to be Jory, and at some point they built the dam and the river came through and it eventually flooded this town of Jory. And so you've lost, and there were people who didn't know what to do. They locked the doors and closed the windows because you never know when you want to come back, as one old lady says. And you don't, there was one guy who just didn't, he would kind of sat on a boat and started like hitting his paddle on the roofs of houses there. And then eventually, shot himself to death there on that boat in the lake because he didn't know where else to live. And he has this wonderful moment where they talk about the water getting so heavy, rain water coming down off the mountains and threatening to destroy the dam. Water starts flowing around one side, digs its way through, and then the people of the town down below, on the downstream of the dam, the people up on the mountains, they all come down to try to save this dam. They have to get construction material from the local hotel they're building. They shoot a bunch of mules and dump them down into this spot to try to stop the water from rushing down and destroying the town. And eventually they win, but it's this incredible heroic effort. And that's juxtaposed immediately with kind of the shenanigans going on with Color Fest. It just looks like the blood is run thin. It's kind of a sad state of affairs compared to the heroics of like 2 generations back.
I wonder if that's like a theme of this story, is that change comes and you can't stop it. That's what this narrator needs to learn, is he needs to quit holding on to the way it was and check into the next thing that's going to happen, maybe. But talking about that, the water going around the dam, I love that before we the story kind of has two climaxes, I feel like. The first climax is that recounting of the dam nearly giving away, or the river overflowing the dam, anyways, the lake coming down. And the second climax is the prophet from Jupiter going out to save Shithead the dog.
The dog who chases
Yeah.
ducks out on the lake. Well, the lake's
Yeah.
frozen over and the dog has fallen through the ice.
Yeah.
So the prophet of Jupiter, this strange proselytizer, slides out onto the ice to try to save the dog.
Yeah. But I love that before we get to that first climax of the dam nearly giving way, we've already heard the abutment of land up there by it called Pierce Arrow Point. And you don't think about it, but then you understand why it's called Pierce Arrow Point, because they dumped that Pierce Arrow car in there, and it makes it, like, just that one little detail, it makes everything real. It's like just getting things out of order like that gives it a sheen of reality, and you invest in it as a real place.
Yes. And in fact, it's strange that the narrator, the dam keeper, has stated in here that when the new mayor, the old mayor, who's been mayor for a long time, he was one of the residents that you hear about from 2 generations back, who was there when the town of Jory got inundated. And well, he's now got testicular cancer, and he's not going to run for mayor again. So again, a little bit of that kind of loss of virility. And the dam keeper is going to leave. The thought of him even being able to exist outside of this place seems kind of impossible. Who will he even be? But yeah, it just seems like the story is I guess in a way a geobiography. It's very much the story of this place and how this man sees it.
No, I totally agree. And I like that it's never stated explicitly that Junie is that mayor's son, but we all know it. I love it when things are done indirectly like that, when we as a reader are allowed to assemble the pieces together instead of having it explicitly stated. It makes us participants, and when we participate in the creation of a thing, then it means so much more to us, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Well, what it brings to mind is Scott McCloud's book, Understanding Comics, where he talks about there's that gutter between panels. And you see a panel of a man chasing another man with an axe. And then there's a gutter. And then there's a panel of the night skyline of the city and just the letters coming out. And you had to figure out what's going on in the gutter. And you're pretty sure guy got him in the head with an axe.
And I mean, that gutter can be the gap that David Kirby was teaching us about in that class at Florida State, for sure.
Yes.
But also in McCloud's Understanding Comics, he says how he explains how like a simple stick figure happy face character is oftentimes easier for us as readers to identify with or inhabit than a realistic, like a photorealistically drawn like character, because that's like a wall we can't enter. And and that's something I always keep in mind when I'm writing. Unless I'm really pressed to do it, I hardly ever describe my characters such that you could draw a picture of them.
Interesting. So keep them abstract enough that the reader can maybe inhabit that person.
Exactly. Because I mean, you don't know if your readers are going to be male, female, they're going to be all different cultures, and I don't want anybody to be excluded. I want everybody to be able to participate if I can.
Yes. Do you think that's why I don't know, did the first person, I don't know if this was at all a surprise to you. You'd probably read plenty of first person narratives, but the fact that this is first person and that the dam keeper never names himself and no one else names him. And also we'll talk about Lons in a minute, first person, and you don't know until the very end even what the narrator's name is. But I guess maybe that helps you to inhabit that character.
That's a really good point. I think it does. I mean, the first place I ever saw that was James Welch's Winter in the Blood. He does that. He has a whole novel where the character doesn't have a name, and I didn't even realize it till somebody said it in class or something. And I love the way it hits that I can completely identify with and inhabit a character, and only realize later that they don't have a name. I really like that dynamic a lot.
Yes. You'd mentioned earlier that the story is in part maybe the story of water pressing up against the dam. And one of the very first things the narrator says is the most important part of my job is to maintain a constant pond level. Right. And that's what you have to do with the dam, right? He lowers the water level every night and then he lets it build back up. But my sense from that sentence alone is I've got to maintain control. I've got to keep my head level. and every step of the way, like every page, you see some note about his wife ignoring him, not loving him anymore, betraying him. And I just get the sense he's if this goes on much longer, he's going to crack, and he knows it. And if he cracks, literally the city downstream could be in danger.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also on that, I think on the second page of the story, when he's talking about the dam, he says, this is where I live, and this is what I think. A dam is an unnatural thing, like a diaphragm,
Yes.
And of course, conception is the thing occupying every waking moment. And I think it's like the goggles he wears too. Like everything he explains, it's like you can almost, like, not always, I think probably 75% of the time you can ascribe some fertility or conception like motif or something to it, like with Easter with all the eggs, it's I love it when a theme like that or a compulsion permeates the whole story and just won't quit bubbling up. That's really fun for me.
Oh yeah. And he's completely eaten up with his inability to conceive a child, or his wife's abandoning. He sees her as abandoning him because of that.
I always wonder if this story was part of where King of the Hill comes from, Hank Hill and his narrow urethra. I always wonder if there's like a line of influence.
Nice, that's great. Tell me, what do you think about the title? Why call this The Prophet from Jupiter? Because Archie Simpson, the titular prophet from Jupiter, is he's significant, but he's certainly not the main character. He has an important, sad moment at the end where he's trying to rescue Shithead the dog, who broke through the ice, and he rescues the dog, but then the ice snaps from under him. He drops into the water, and he's gone, while his wife and his 5 sons are up on a bridge screaming and trying to, holding out their arms for him. It's a terrible moment. But why call it that when he's not the main character?
I guess I can think of 2 reasons. The first reason is to get eyes on your story, you have to give it a hooky title, and I think that's why I came to the story initially. I was like, really, a prophet from Jupiter in this literary annual? Of course I'm going to read that. But secondly, I think that the narrator, the dam keeper, is fascinated with the prophet from Jupiter, because the prophet from Jupiter has no uncertainty in his life, and he does exhibit heroism at the end, even at the cost of sacrificing himself. And I think the prophet from Jupiter, who knows if he's on track or not, but he's found happiness, and what more can we ask for? And this guy, this dam keeper, this narrator, he has not found happiness. He is still feeling around in the dark for what's going to complete him, or what's going to not make him sad anyways, but the prophet from Jupiter has found it. And also, I guess we can't look away from the fact that the prophet from Jupiter has 5 kids and the dam keeper has none.
Yes So he's got the virility thing. He says his kind of brags about his wife, saying his wife smells like good earth, which is a weird thing to say about your beloved, but I guess it works for the guy.
You don't want to write that in a birthday card.
But the narrator has a moment at the end. It gets very strange where he meanders through most of the story, and I think if you were to compare like the length of sentences, at least the sound of it seems like it gets faster paced toward the end to me, maybe shorter sentences or something. But he has this moment of prophecy at the end where he sees these characters, these people he's known or heard of, like Old Man Bill Burdett, who was one of the who was one of the guys there at the in Jory at the beginning, who kind of left his old truck down there in the water, even though it was brand new. It's like he kind of comes up. There's this giant catfish that's the size of a man that's down there that everyone knows about, and the prophet of Jupiter and his family is there at the end. So I guess the dam keeper is sort of a prophet as well, in a sense, at the very end.
Yeah, well, I mean, either that or Tony Earley is not poking fun, but just trying to illustrate or kind of dramatize how Western literature is basically eschatological. It follows like the biblical pattern where it all reaches a rapturous moment at the end, and that long sentence you're talking about at the end, it's really an inline list with semicolons like as bullet points, and that always reminds me of the last I don't know, probably 800 words, 1200 words of Bret Easton Ellis's Lunar Park, where it just like launches into this lyrical thing just like this at the end of Tony Earley's story. And I am so drawn to those kind of endings. It's like that Flannery O'Connor, everything that rises must converge, and I totally agree with that. I don't like endings to peter out, or I don't ever want to turn the page and realize, oh, the story went over, I didn't clock it. That makes me so sad. Like,
Yeah.
when I listen to an audiobook, you can almost always identify when you're in the last paragraph, because the tone and delivery of the voice actors reading changes pitch a little bit. They get
Yeah.
like more final with it, and some
Yeah.
productions even put like a really distant instrumental thing behind it, so you're like
Mhm.
riding that music up, you're swelling with it at the
Yep.
end. And we can't do that in prose, but we do have rhythm, and we do have, like Tony Earley, we have a colon with a lot of semicolons and everything coming together at once.
Yeah.
We can achieve that same thing with just prose, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard many a song leader in church at the last verse of a hymn,
Mm.
that last bar, basically, they slow
Yeah.
it down. And
Yeah.
oh, well, we're not going to sing any more verses. They
Yeah.
just concluded it, because there's a little bit of it's not dramatic, but you completely get the signal. We're slowing it down. And I know exactly what you're talking about with that ending, that last paragraph. I think about Paul Tremblay's the cabin at the end of the world. That's exactly how the narrator did that last harrowing paragraph, where you realize, where the characters realize where they stand with the terrible decision that has been forced on them.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, do you think that this is a ghost story? Because there is so much of a haunting of the past, haunting of Elizabeth, and they actually see some people talk about the ghosts of the generation or two back.
I would say that it's a Southern story, and I think Southern stories 90% of the time are ghost stories.
Wow.
And so I think by default it kind of is a ghost story.
Yes.
We don't get the same kind of spectral appearances that we get in other ghost stories, but you're right, the past isn't gone, and I think that's the feeling you get in the South, is that the past, like, it's not gone at all. It's still here with us. Let's see, it's like there's that Shenandoah song, what is it, Sunday in the South, is that what it's called, where this kid is up in the barber chair in his little hometown, and he says, all the old people hanging around the barber shop, they still smell the powder burning, and they probably always will, from the Civil War. That always hits me so hard, because I think that to me just compresses a whole South into a single line.
Last thing I just wanted to ask quickly about this: there's so much, especially as interjecting commentary on his ex-wife into the narrative. Do you think of this as, in some sense, a stream of consciousness narrative? Is that pushing it too far? Because he really, he'll be in the middle of a sentence, and he'll just kind of jump over to the thought of his wife eating away at him, and they'll continue on with the narrative.
Yeah, reading the story, it's kind of like it's like you're watching a television, and like every 30 seconds somebody switches it to the other show. You're like watching 3 or 4 shows at once, and I think that's how his brain is working. I don't know if I would quite call it stream of consciousnness, just because I always adhere to Janet Burroway's kind of thumbnail definition of stream of consciousness, which is it's the process of thinking, as relayed or rendered on the page. And but to tell you the truth, both these stories I picked, they both walk right up to the edge of some sort of stream of conscious delivery, but they don't quite step over, and that's really my favorite way of writing, actually.
Yes. Do you have a favorite passage you wouldn't mind reading for us?
Man.
The Prophet from Jupiter.
Gotta grab my specs here, man. From my dam, I've caught catfish that weighed 18, 24, and 31 pounds, just babies. Randy said the 31-pounder was big enough. I think I scare him. I got my picture in the paper in Hendersonville holding up the fish. My beard is long and significant. The catfish looks wise. I mailed a copy to Elizabeth in Montesano. The new police chief drives up to the hurricane fence gate after Randy goes home and shines his spotlight on me. I don't even unbuckle my harness anymore. The mayor is not running for re-election. I will stay until inauguration day. The new police chief will live with Elizabeth and their child in the dam keeper's house. Randy's girlfriend is pregnant again, and the house isn't big enough for 3 kids. That's not all the threads in the story, but that's a lot of the threads coming together at once, But I love that. Like, I think other writers might have put coordinating conjunctions in there, but, although, though, yet, and to make it flow. But this is not a story about flow. This is a story trying to resist flow because you don't want the water to go over the dam. So therefore, everything is like, it's not staccato. The sentences are really long, but it's definitely like enjammed. It feels like a poetry move, like it's enjammed.
Yes. Ah, that's terrific. I love that. Well, let's talk about Lawns by Mona Simpson, set at the University of California, Berkeley, about a young lady who's named Jenny. Tell us, what do we need to know about the story?
Oh, I guess there's a lot of trigger warnings, first of all.
There is absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll put something in the
Uh,
in the notes on the description for the show. But yeah,
um,
there's definitely some content warning here.
yeah, it's a young woman. I presume she's 19. She could be 18, but she's just coming to college. She's a freshman, like you say, and she's just trying to. She wants to be part of the pack. She wants to be normal. She and as the story builds, we're like, why do you want to be normal so bad? And what we pick up from that is you haven't been normal. So you want to be normal. You haven't been normal. What happened? What do you think happened to make you not normal or whatever? And as we slowly find out, her dad has been molesting her for her whole life, basically. And that comes out probably about 40% into the story, I suspect, maybe 35, somewhere around there. And of course, it changes everything. And it's really not extreme is the wrong word, but sudden when it happens. And so then it's just about the fallout of this revelation and how what it does to her family, what it does to her relationships at college, with her roommate, with her boyfriend, Glenn. Her roommate is Lauren. And it's all kind of under I want to say umbrella, but it's really more of a bookend story where it starts out with her, she steals mail. She works in the mailroom. And then that's maintained once or twice throughout the story where she has to talk to police officers. But then at the end, it comes back around to to the mail stealing thing. And I love that every time I read this story, it ambushes me. I'm like, oh, we're back here. Because with stories, what I always tell my students is that stories so often end where they began. And the reason for that, we want to say it's because of circularity, but I don't think that's quite it. I mean, no, I'm not saying I don't subscribe to Joseph Campbell's monomyth, the sun sets, the sun rises, all that stuff. I think that is the pattern that our narratives follow here in the West. But I really think the reason that we often see stories ending where they begin is because when you show a character against the same backdrop you initially met them in, then any change or development they have gone through is heightened. You can see it better against the same backdrop, And so we start out with her in the mailroom and then we end up with her in the mailroom, but she's different, of course this has changed her, but it's an uplifting, to me, this is an uplifting ending. It's a terrible grind to get there because it's awful stuff happening, but she's finally starting to figure out who she is at the end. I feel like she's becoming what she always wanted to be, just part of the world,
I don't know if you remember the first time you read this, but did you see the big shocker coming?
I did not see the big shocker coming when her father rents that hotel room, and then I don't know if molestation is the right word. She kind of calls it an affair sometimes. It seems like I don't think that's the right word either. Incest is the wrong word. It's just madness,
Yeah, definitely.
But no, I did not see it coming.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I was teaching this story back in about 01 or 02, and for some reason my class was composed of, there were 19 students in it, I believe, and I want to say 14 of them at least were working, their degree was whatever degree you get to go into child protective services. Like somehow, like their advisor was funneling all their students to me, or maybe keeping their class together. I'm not sure what was going on. Anyways, they were all in my class. And when we read this story, they all to a person saw this coming 100% of the way, like from the because they've encountered this stuff in their teaching and their coursework and everything. And so they knew immediately what was going on. And that really fascinates me. And it makes me wish that I had that kind of like sensitivity so I could possibly help people more or something,
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back through it, I've read it 3 times now, and certainly on the third, first time I read it, I'm so naive. I had no idea, and then she drops the bomb saying, "Yeah, I'm sleeping with my father." You don't just go and tell somebody that over dessert, I don't know how to. And then she Yeah, and then I go back and read it again. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
First time, the first interaction, he's crying because he's dropping her off at college.
Yeah.
You know what? I'd probably do that, dropping my daughter off at
No,
college too. And then the
I did too.
second time,
Yeah.
second time he's mentioned, she remembers him telling her that she didn't smell good, and she slugged him for it. And
Yeah.
what does that mean exactly? And then yeah, when he shows up in her dorm room, and he's just slumped over, and she's just kind of grossed out by him, or just so disappointed with him, and he wants her to stay at the hotel room with him, and she doesn't want to. She wants to hang out with her friends and stuff. And then when they actually get you just get the sense that she's embarrassed of him. Well, that I can see that kind of makes that's kind of a stereotype. But then the more you'll learn in the hotel room scene, the more like gross it's getting, until she reveals that he's kind of assaulting her in this hotel room. But what's so very strange is that you have this situation that you'd be hard pressed to find something more awful than what this man is doing to his daughter. And yet the way she describes it, she just kind of passes it. She says, I don't know, it's like it's just so gross to her. She just hates it. And then she goes on talking about, I mean, people would say my dad's handsome. My mom certainly thinks he is. And she just kind of keeps going, like she doesn't realize how traumatizing this is, I guess, because she's always lived with it.
I think it's been normalized within her life. Like this was going on before she knew it was wrong, so it's been normalized. But I do all those moments you're talking about, which in retrospect are red flags that we should pick up on. That's just the way Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense works, with the big reveal that Dr. Crow is dead, and you go back and look at it and you're like, oh yeah, his wife wasn't talking back to him. Oh yeah, he's wearing the same clothes all the time. All the little clues, and it's wonderful to drop big bombs like that. But if you haven't planted seeds, like breaking the metaphor of bomb and seeds, but if you haven't planted things before, then it's useless. It's out of left field. You have to make it. If you do it like that without anything planted, then it's a gimmick story that you just read once. But if you do it with stuff planted along the way, then it's something people can go back to again and again and work through it and just watch it unfold, And also the biggest clue to me, yes, it's super creepy seeing the dad like petting the arm of that sweater and all the weird stuff that we should pick up on. But the big cue to me is that her diction, Jenny's diction level, is completely locked in at 12 years old when her father started this. She talks to me, she does not talk like a freshman in college. She talks like a 12-year-old,
That's right. It's I kind of thought of it as a Valley Girl kind of sound. I mean, she's I guess from California. At least she's in school in California. But there's like comma splice after comma splice. It is not normal proper grammar. It's extremely conversational. And it is a child's language.
You're right about the comma splices, but they all work too, which is a weird thing. Usually comma splices don't get a pass, but they all get a pass here, I feel like. But also she does things with tense, which I've never seen in any other story, in all the stories I've read, because she'll do a sentence that the first clause is past tense, the second clause is present tense, and then she'll come back to some weird kind of tense that's between those two. And that just blows me away. It's almost like there's a sliding point of narration, but I mean, the big umbrella is present tense. And the reason that Mona Simpson had to keep it in present tense was she wanted that leaning over the cliff at the end, like I put the letter back in the box so I can get it like everyone else. She wants that present tense moment right there. And if were the story told in retrospect, then if it was told 10 months later, then there would have to be some interpretive distance there. And she did not want that interpretive distance. She wanted us walking out of that mailroom with Jenny to come around and get her mail like everyone else,
Yes, absolutely. It is fascinating how, I wonder who's she telling all this to. She even says at one point, there's just one time when she says, basically, that's why I'm telling you this, or she refers to the listener. Who do you think she's actually telling this to? And it must be over several sessions, because you find out later in the narrative, it's not like they have like little marker breaks or something in the text, but you find out that, oh, well, I got called into the office and the university cops there asking around about people stealing, like workers stealing mail. So this is happening over 3 or 4 times. So who do you think she's talking to?
I think it's that that conceit we see so often in fiction, where you do have like a Mike Hammer telling a little gritty PI story, and Mike Hammer is not going to a therapist, and he's not talking to a bartender. He's just like narrating in his head, and I think that's what she's doing. It's like she's giving herself narrative therapy almost. But no, I don't think this is like a dramatic. I don't think there's any kind of situation where she is actually relaying this story to someone, because I get the sense that she's not going to go to seek help from a counselor, or she said she's not initially. Anyways, maybe she does later. I don't know, but I love that conceit. Like, with My Heart Is a Chainsaw, one of the questions I got early on in notes on it from friends and editors and stuff was so this little essay of Jade's seems to comment on that chapter, it's a Final Girl chapter followed by a Final Girl essay,
Yes.
They would say, who is doing that? Who is arranging it? Is there an editor here? And that I always insisted that we can never establish that. We can never know that, because that's the magic of fiction, that this stuff is falling into place,
Yes.
And I do like this. I mean, the stuff is curated. It has been curated and sequenced and put in this specific progression, to achieve like an argument or a narrative or something. But I think pulling the curtain back and saying, oh, it's him, it's her, or it's them, whatever, I think that would break everything,
Interesting. So you want to maintain that magic, that little bit of distance there,
that unexplainable thing, I used to be, and I guess I still am, really into David Lynch films, and I started to notice from watching them over and over that David Lynch films always have a little like logical impossibility nestled somewhere in them that doesn't make any sense at all, like in Lost Highway, when the Bill Pullman character calls himself, and that can't be happening, but to me, like in Chainsaw or in this story Lawns, where we don't really know who she's talking to, or we don't know who's organizing this, that is that logical impossibility. That's the thing that fundamentally makes no sense. But I think those things that don't track, that don't make sense, they're like a Cenobite hook coming out or hooking into somebody and pulling them into the story. If they can buy this one little logical inconsistency, then the story has them and it can do with them what it wants to.
Yeah, I remember someone on Twitter complained to James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, how can these people all be speaking like English? They're from all these different planets and races. And Gunn's response was, because movies.
Yeah,
and that's it. So, and he was perfectly fine with that little bit of lack of realism or whatever, because it's a movie and it's fun and it's magic.
I love that trick in The Hunt for Red October, where Sean Connery's submarine captain and his second in command, not his second in command, his like state officer who's on the ship, everybody's been talking Russian on this submarine for the first like 6 minutes of the movie or something, and then the camera, while this state officer, this like representative of the government, who is kind of like a taskmaster on board or something, the camera zooms in on him speaking Russian, and as he's speaking Russian, it becomes English, and we zoom back out, and everyone speaks English for the rest of the movie. That's the magic of movies, and
that's right.
And that's not local to just movies either. I think we can do that kind of stuff in fiction as well.
Yeah, and not become continuity cops and get too caught up in that, because it's I don't know, that's not a lot of fun.
No, it's not.
What do you think? What do you think Jenny's stealing of the mail does for the story? Because it is just kind of such an odd thing, but it's clearly crucial. And it gives her a moment at the end, I think.
It does. I think, to me, on the very first page, you can see what it does. Let me see if I can get my glasses out. Tampering with the United States mail is a federal crime, I know. Listen, let me tell you, I know. I got a summons in my mailbox to go to the employment office next Wednesday. Sure, I'm scared. What that does is that's like one of the single most important things that all stories and novels need, is a ticking clock. We now have until next Wednesday, and so what that mail thing does, it kind of gives a dramatic scaffolding for the rest of the story to hang pieces off of. But yeah, stories without ticking clocks, they float away from me. I can't stay invested in them.
Wow. Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking maybe I was thinking about the thematic use of it or whatever, but no, that's just a real practical thing you need in narrative to make it exciting. And she's like in danger. You don't want her to get found out, or you want her to stop stealing people's cookies.
Yeah. Well, in Prophet from Jupiter, it's also a ticking clock. These are his last days. And he says that a few times. I'm about to leave, I'm on my way out. And so and I think stories, they've got to have ticking clocks,
Yeah. Why do you think it was called lawns? What, I mean,
Yeah,
what more banal word could you use to title a story?
I agree. I think the visual where we get lawns from, I mean, you can get it from a lot of places. Glenn is a lawnmower. Um, her brother and Glenn both used to play in the backyard on the lawn. But I think where it comes from is Jenny standing in her mail room with all the wall of post office boxes open, and she can see through those boxes the stadium, the football stadium,
Yes.
or so the field, and she sees all these little lawns, these little, like, lawns through there, and they're all the same, and that is what she's wanted the whole story, is to be part of the world, and
Yeah.
to not be the weird girl,
Yeah.
and I mean, lawns are also I mean, when you go to suburbia, everybody, it's like a competition who can have the neatest, most manicured lawn, and they all look the same, and
Little
that's what
blue velvet there. Yeah, a little
yeah,
blue velvet
yeah,
at the
exactly.
beginning there. That's immediately what
Yeah,
comes to mind when you say
yeah,
lawns is
yeah.
that blue
For
velvet
sure.
shot.
And so I think that's what it is. I think for her, lawns signify like the sameness of suburbia. How, like, when you go to any suburban block, not any, but most suburban blocks, every house looks like the alien mother, the mother from Aliens came through and squeezed out house, 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 and they're all the
Yeah.
same, But and that seems oppressive to us or weird, but to Jenny, that's so attractive, that's what she's wanted her whole life. She doesn't want to be the lawn with like rusted washing machines and an upside down Toyota and a huge ridiculous flagpole. She doesn't want everyone looking at her lawn. She just wants people to drive by and say, "Oh, another lawn, another lawn, another lawn."
Yeah. 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 To be able to go around to the front of the post
Yeah,
office and get her mail like everyone else.
like everyone
I think
else.
that's why she likes Glenn so much.
Mhm.
He's a good-looking guy, but you
Yeah,
really don't get any sense of any other redeeming qualities. And the way she
yeah,
describes their sex life is like
yeah,
it's okay,
yeah,
but I think
yeah.
he's just normal.
When she's having sex with him, it's not about the sex. It's about, this is a normal thing kids my age do. I
Yeah.
think that's what it is for her. And yeah, Glenn is nothing special, but he is special in that he's not her dad.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
One
Yeah.
last thing about lines is
Yeah.
you can track like the profanity in the story. I think there's only, or the first cuss word, it might be the only cuss word. No, I think she says something later. But when they're going camping, and like the
Yes.
first time he really molests her, I mean, not really, he's done it before, but I don't know,
Yeah.
the first time it's
No,
serious.
this is actual sexual intercourse,
Yeah,
penal penetration. It
yeah,
sounds like.
yeah.
Yeah.
But she finally uses some profanity there, and it hits so hard when she says that,
Yeah.
and that I wish people would do that. I wish they would conserve the profanity such that it actually has some weight when it hits.
Yeah.
If you're cussing the whole way through, then it just becomes the level, and it's hard to have
Yeah.
a spike when everything is like that.
Yeah, yeah, and what follows that is her acknowledging that he had me in the woods alone in
Yeah,
this. We were going camping. It's in a tent. He could have murdered me.
yeah,
It's a pretty harrowing moment there
it really
when
is.
she
And
realizes
yeah.
just how brutal this situation is.
But then she comes out of it and she's like, nothing was ever the same. He always spent twice as much on me as he did on Danny. Like
Yeah,
she uses this relationship, or not relationship, that's the wrong word. She uses this I don't know what you call it, with her dad,
yeah.
to she leverages it so she can get more stuff,
Yeah.
yeah,
She
which
says after that moment, she was the one calling the
yeah,
shots,
exactly.
which I don't think is, in my opinion, is not fully expressing what's going on in this
Yeah.
dynamic. But
Oh
she's able
no.
to get whatever she wants:
Yeah.
expensive clothes.
Yeah.
She's going away to college, and
Yeah.
he's and then he becomes just more and more pathetic in a way as they go. And he's crying because he
Yeah.
knows, he even says at this over the phone, we're not going to end up together, are we? It's just like just so bizarre and disgusting, and it just seems so accurate
I
for
know.
someone
Yeah.
who's doing that.
It totally does. And I mean, she's not like, I know, evil or manipulative for asking for more or whatever. It's just like she's in the worst situation, and
Yeah,
she, in her like kid way, is kind of making the most of it. It's
yeah,
like self-defense almost, it feels
yeah.
like.
There's a description in here where she seems to believe that as her father is to her,
Mhm.
maybe she is to
Yeah.
Glenn and she I think in some way can live with them splitting up toward the end, because she doesn't want to infect, or she's afraid she will infect his life in some way. It's just it's terribly sad that she would see herself. And then there's this beautiful scene with Lauren, her roommate, who finally drags her out to a public school and pushes her, like her face up against a fence is kind of the way it's described. It says, look at those 8-year-old kids, look at those 8-year-old girls. If one of them, her father is abusing her the way your father abused you, now that she's told her roommate what was going on, how can you blame that child? If you could forgive that child for what her father was doing to her, can't you forgive yourself? And it seems to be a watershed moment where now she's able to, I think Jenny's able to grapple with the situation a little bit more. And it's hard to read, but it's also very beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, no, it really is. And it's kind of interesting because early on she's talking about the letters she snipes from her job and reads, and she finds out these other kids from her high school have these complicated intertwined lives. And then in that moment, her and Lauren's life are intertwining in the same way, and they're helping each other, and so she's becoming what she always wanted to be, not the outsider, but part of
a normal kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about how these two stories impacted your own work.
I think, it's talking, I don't know about all my work, but my heart is a chainsaw anyways. I feel like this could be one place where Jade starts.
Yes.
Page 93 on this copy I have. This is, let's see, the father is molesting Jenny and she's young, and Danny, the brother, is in the backyard, like he's been excluded from the house, of course. And Danny just went and got his glove and baseball from the closet, and he'd go and throw it against the house, against the outside wall in the driveway. I'd be in my room. I'd be like dead. I'd be wood, telling myself it doesn't count. No one has to know. I'll say I'm still a virgin. It's not really happening to me. I'm dead. I'm blank. I'm just letting time stop and pass. Yeah. And then I'd hear the sock of the ball in the mitt and the slam of the screen door, and I knew it was true. It was really happening. That's like Jade's dilemma. That's why Jade thinks she could never be a final girl, because her father is similar to this dude. He's possibly worse than this dude. But I don't know if it's really a spectrum of badness. I think it's just terrible. Once you step over a line,
it's a black hole, gravity well of evil.
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like, I wonder if that's not where I got the idea because I'm always thinking about final girls, and I was back when I was reading this for the first time as well, and that interested me. Like, could Jenny here be a final girl? And of course I can't write about Jenny, but I can write about Jade.
Interesting. Wow.
And as for a Prophet from Jupiter, I feel like I stole Jory and this whole North Carolina town and just put it 8,000 feet up the mountain in Idaho.
Yes. Yeah.
I even have let me think. I don't know if it's in Chainsaw or not. It's in the later books, the next two books. Definitely. I say definitely. I'm not sure it's in Reaper. It might be in Reaper. All these three novels like merged together in my head, and I can't tell what goes where. But that big fish, that catfish floating like a zeppelin down Main Street. That's one of my favorite images I've ever read in anything. And I don't think I'll ever shake that image. And I used to, in a lot of my short stories I was writing in the late 90s, I would always find a way to have a dam and a giant catfish. A lot of them would have that, and it never really quite worked. I don't know if they got published or not, but I was finally able to do a version of that with Drown Town and Indian Lake and Proof Rock and all that. So and just Tony Earley's way of having more going on the page than should be going on the page. His delivery is denser, and it takes some unpacking. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that he's given me enough respect that I can do that. He doesn't have to
as a reader. Yes, that's right.
He didn't have to hold a spoon and give me here comes the airplane, put it in my mouth. He can tell me something, and if I apply myself, I can make sense of it. And that's my favorite kind of reading.
Yes. And I guess that, these images and the giant catfish deep under the water and having a town inundated and the descriptions of that town just, I guess, kind of mold in your subconscious for decades really, and have in some ways are kind of maybe a prefiguring of some things we see in Drown Town.
Oh, and I guess with Prophet, I say Winter in the Blood does the no name narrator thing as well, but I read this story before I read Winter in the Blood, so it could have been where that starts for
Yeah.
me, And Mongrels, the main character has no name, but
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I kept looking for him if they'd ever named the character
yeah,
there, and he never gets a name.
yeah, just like the Dam Keeper, he's the journalist, he's the
Yep.
nephew, he's the criminal, he's everything. Yeah.
Now, without asking you what the name is, do you know what the Mongrels character's name is?
From talking to TV outfits about Mongrels a lot, I have had to give him a name. Yeah, I don't know if it'll stick, but I have had to give him a name because it's hard to talk about someone if they don't have a name.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of writing it, you never
No.
came up with a name that you just kept to yourself. Wow.
But it wasn't on purpose either. I got about 80 pages into it, and I realized he didn't have a name, and so I thought, well, I'll let Darren say his name. But then Darren never would say his name, and so he never got it.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I do wonder, just because both of these stories, Lawns and The Prophet from Jupiter, are first person. They're both first person present tense, I believe, and they are so conversational in tone. They're both so strong and distinct in that way. Did that have an impact on your sense of POV? I mean, I know that I was looking at some of your novels. Even in your novels, it came from Del Rio, first person. My Heart is a Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper, third person, and even Not for Nothing, second person novel. And then if you pick up the 3 Miles Past, there's 3 novellas, each one in one of the points of view. Did you pick up anything, or do you think these had an impact on your sense of POV?
They definitely did. And there's also the like the Greek chorus or the royal first person, the we, and I love doing that as well. And it's funny because My Heart is a Chainsaw really comes from me reading Jeffrey Eugenides' The Virgin Suicides, which uses that kind of Greek chorus delivery. And I wanted to do that. And the first drafts of what became My Heart is a Chainsaw are royal first person. And also that it came from Del Rio you hit up. It actually is me trying to do Philip K. Dick's Radio Free Albemuth novel, where he has a thing in the middle of that novel, a sentence ends at the end of a chapter, and you think, oh, this is a misprint. I've got a rare copy or something, and it picks up like after a blank page on the next chapter, it picks up in the second half of a different sentence from a different character, and that blows me away. So I tried to do something similar, and it came from Del Rio. And yeah, I am always poking and prodding at what's possible with I don't know, point of view or distance or whatever we're going to call it, and tell you the truth, my default setting is second person. That's my favorite. That's my that's my natural voice to tell a story in, a second person. Not all, but when I write down story ideas, they're all, you're in a room, there's there's a window, you think somebody's watching you, what are you going to do? Like that, all my story ideas are you, and I have to change them because the audience doesn't tolerate second person very well.
I mean, it sounds to me, I associate second person with EC Comics, with just that you come into the room and you go and look through the window and that kind of thing. I was going to ask you, I mean, I know that you describe yourself as a pantser, not a plotter. You sit down and start writing. How do you choose immediately? I mean, if you default to second person, that's cool. How do you choose, though, if you're going to switch it to first or third person or stick with second? Do you feel like maybe each one of these POVs has a natural vibe to it, and what kind of emotion you want to evoke? And so there's a person that lines up, or do you maybe a little more circumspect and think about, what do I want to try to pull off this time?
It's more about what is the expositional burden of this story, like with The Prophet from Jupiter, what this location, you called it, what'd you call it, geobiography or something?
Yeah, it's like a geobiography kind of thing.
Like, so that needs texture and layers. It needs the history of this town, and the reader is not going to tolerate a third person delivery where the story stops to say, and then this happened, and then this happened. That's super boring. But if it's relayed by a character, then you can go into those layers and give that past. And but at the same time, if you're doing an international thriller where you're in Paris and Istanbul and Antarctica all over the place, you're probably going to go third person because you need to be able to flip, and second person it's it's more malleable. And within second person, or maybe besides second person, there's also dramatic monologue, which I love using dramatic monologue. It's when one character in the story is speaking to another, and it looks on the surface like second person, but there's usually a reveal that you realize it's somebody talking in the story, and I love to graduate from second person from dramatic monologue to second person. I love that little shuffle. And also second person works best if it's present tense as kind of bound by future tense. I feel like if you start future tense and then slide into present tense and then graduate again at the end of future tense, second person seems to just function a lot better like that to me. And also in second person, and I think I messed this up, and not for nothing. Giving the character a name is usually a mistake, I think.
Wow, really?
It's like that Scott McCloud thing. You want the character to just have a blank smiley face,
Yep. Oh, that's amazing. Let me see. There's just a couple of other. Well, I did want to ask you. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on place as character. So clearly, like Lake Glen is a character. There's a lot of things going on in it. I feel like there's a sense of this. It's moving on, but there's a real sense of loss of what it used to be. And then all of Proof Rock and Indian Lake, it has a character to it. Do you think that's something you picked up out of Prophet from Jupiter?
It could very well be that the Prophet of Jupiter is kind of where that all distilled for me. But I would like to say that I learned it there, but I think I didn't actually learn it until about 2018, which is many years later. I always fancied myself as someday becoming a writer kind of following Kafka's ethos, or what is that movie, Joe versus a Volcano, that Tom Hanks movie, where the backdrop is just like this industrial gray space that it's nameless, faceless, characterless. It doesn't matter, or like what's that Nicole Kidman movie, Dogville, where the whole set is like masking tape on a stage, and I love that so much. That is so compelling to me. It's like a trick you would see Robert Coover or somebody use. I love it. But let's see, after I wrote Mongrels and Mapping the Interior, I needed to do another novel. And so I wrote two novels, actually. I wrote American Neanderthal, or Neanderthal, how you're supposed to say it, and Texas is Burning. And Texas is Burning, I wanted to write about a down as like detective trying to solve a serial killer thing. And I wanted to put it against that Kafka backdrop, just a gray cityscape. But I got about 110, 120 pages into that novel, and it was like trying to push a boulder uphill, which is not how novel writing is for me. Novel writing is usually I'm on top of the boulder and we're just going really fast downhill, and I'm just trying not to fall off. And I was like, what is going on here? And so I look at the conflict, and that was built all right, and the characters were built all right. And I thought, well, maybe something's broken that I can't see. And so previously I had said yes to an invitation to a book festival in my hometown of Midland, Texas. And so while I was in this dilemma of what's wrong with this novel, I went down there to Midland to participate in this festival for 3 or 4 days. And while I was being kind of chauffeured around from this venue to that venue in the back of cars, I would look out and see Midland passing by. And I realized this is the backdrop, this is where this novel needs to take place. And so I hustled home and rewrote that novel with Midland as a character. And the novel just told itself. And I never considered myself a place writer. I kind of always had looked down on place writing. I don't know why. I had some prejudice against it, but that book was where I finally realized that place is super important as a character, And
that became Growing Up Dead in Texas then.
No, Texas is Burning never got published. It's just sitting.
Ah, that's why. Okay, that's it. Yeah.
No, Growing Up Dead in Texas. I wrote that in 2008, I think it was. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just moved to Colorado, and my first graduate workshop, like previously teaching at Texas Tech for 8 years, every graduate workshop I had, the first day I would say, next 15, 16 weeks, y'all write the novel. If you don't, you fail the class. And so everybody would work and write a novel.
Yeah.
When I came to Colorado, I told my class that, and like 13 hands went up, and 13 students. And they're like, well, we got other stuff to do. And, how can we possibly write a novel? And they just kept arguing and arguing. And I finally said, you know what? I'll make y'all a deal. I'll start a novel this afternoon. If I'm not done with it by the end of the semester, then y'all are all released from this, to do it. And so I went home that night and I didn't have any novel ideas. I hadn't been planning on writing a novel, which is why that character is named Stephen Graham Jones and why he lives in my old houses, because I wasn't making stuff up, you know. And I wrote it over the course of the semester, you know, and
Wow.
that's how that happened. But I guess I didn't come back to Texas until Texas is Burning. It's also set in Midland,
Yeah.
and also I just came back there again to Lamesa, which is, you know, an hour and a half away, 2 hours away from Midland. I was a teenage slasher set in, and that's actually past tense instead of present tense. I didn't realize when I was writing Only Good Indians and My Heart is a Chainsaw that I was doing present tense. I was just writing, you know.
Huh.
I don't like strategize tenses. I just,
Yeah.
whatever happens happens, and I try to stick with it. And sometimes I have to go back and change everything, which is a heck of a rewrite. But I would see like reviews and stuff, and people would say this is weird, present tense, and I would think it's not weird to me. It's just what I do. But and so with I was a teenage slasher, I realized that I needed to make sure I still had past tense muscles, you know.
Yes, yes, and I was a teenage slasher. I think was just announced. This is
Yep.
an upcoming novel.
Yep.
Are we likely to see it in 2023? Any
No,
idea?
not 2023. Probably 20. If I had to guess, 2024.
Very good. Well, we have that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Well, as we start to wrap this up, a few other questions for you quickly. I do have to ask about this. You know, clearly, you know, we see in a number of your stories the relationship between husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and then in an often strained relationship, a relationship between a parent and a child will figure into a lot of your stories. But specifically, uncles. Uncles are a big deal in a lot of your stories. What do you think's behind that?
Probably just that growing up I had a whole lot of like different fathers, stepfathers and all that. But my uncles, two of my uncles were always a constant. My mom's brothers, they were always like around. Like one of those uncles is the one who gave me access to all his paperbacks when I was 11 or 12 years old. And that just changed my life forever. And the other one, I spent so many years trying to be him. I probably still am trying to be him, you know, just the way he dresses, the way he interacts with people, the way he tells stories and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, uncles in my life have been hugely formative. And so I think it's kind of just natural that they kind of percolate up in my fiction,
Yeah.
you know?
They seem to be frequently a source of truth and a source of stories.
Yeah.
In
Definitely.
your tales.
Yeah. I mean, their uncles are big liars as far as I know, you know? So,
Well, and yet lies can contain truths that can't be told in other ways, right? And that's
exactly
fiction, I suppose.
like Mongrel says, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And one other source of I think about, you know, this whole conversation is about these two stories that were a source of inspiration, but another source of inspiration and mentorship for you that you've mentioned is Joe Lansdale.
Yeah.
He's been a big deal in your career, hasn't he?
He really has. You know, I first met Joe in 2002 down in Austin, Texas. We were both on a panel for Texas Book Festival, I think it was, and it was a Conan the Barbarian panel. I was so thrilled to be on it. And at that time, I had not read Joe Lansdale, but I was sitting up there beside him at the tall table, and the crowd's all out there. And in the Q&A period, somebody raised their hand. I said, Joe, what genre do you write in without skipping a beat? He said, I write in the Joe R. Lansdale genre next, you know. And
Yes. Yeah.
and I realized that's who I want to be, you know. I mean, yes, I love horror, but I also love science fiction, fantasy, literary, crime, thriller,
Yes.
and short stories, flash fiction. I love it all. I'm just excited about it all, and I don't want to be limited to only this shelf, this genre. I want to write Stephen Graham Jones fiction and have that be enough, you know. So yeah, Joe has been my model since that point, and I've read. I don't know if I think he's probably got 60 novels or so by now. I don't think I've read every single one of them, but I bet I've read 50 of them anyways.
Wow. It's great that just to see him now, even today, you know, on Twitter, not that you need anyone to champion you at this point, but he's still championing your work. And that's really cool.
No, he's so kind. And he is when you talk to that dude, he can remember like every comic book he's read, every Edgar Rice Burroughs novel. He just has this amazing recall of story, you know. The same way like a musician, like a guitarist will have this great vocabulary of licks from all these other places, you know. That's how Joe is with fiction, with storytelling, and it's really amazing. I don't have anything near to that, but I'm always so impressed when I talk to him.
That's so cool. I did also want to ask you, we've had, obviously you're keeping the pulse of Indigenous arts here in the U.S. And, this last year we've had, Earth Divers has been an enormous hit. Your comic book, like going into second printings, I don't know if that's normal or typical. I don't think it is. Reservation Dogs has been a huge hit. It's critically and popularly acclaimed. And then that Predator film, Prey, was a big hit. I'm kind of surprised it didn't go to theaters because it was terrific. Is this are we having a moment, or do you think this is a movement? What do you think's going on? Why so much interest in Native American representation in pop culture specifically right now?
I wonder, to me it doesn't necessarily feel like an interest in representation. It feels like we kicked the door open and ran into the room and we're not leaving, like we're not asking if we can be here. We just are here, but as for who kicked that door open, that's the question. Rebecca Roanhorse, maybe, with Trail of Lightning. Like, what she did with that book was she said, I'm not going to go the usual route of Native fiction. I'm just going to go straight to the market, because Native fiction has always percolated up through the university. If it makes it onto enough desktops and enough classrooms, then it gets enough momentum that it kind of goes wide and has a long legs and a long life. But I feel like Rebecca Roanhorse was like, that model is outdated and we don't need it anymore. And so she just went straight with this wonderful novel, Trail of Lightning. And I think, to tell you the truth, I feel like we owe a lot to Get Out as well. In 2016, I guess that was. I feel like 2016 told the world that this weird genre stuff that it's always been able to ignore is actually in conversation with the world, and then Victor LaValle's Ballad of Black Tom reinforced that, like, very shortly after. And I feel like that kind of pushed the door open a little bit. And then Rebecca Roanhorse came with Trail of Lightning and opened up a little more. And also, for the longest time in Native Lit, we had basically like one person, one representative, and that went away. And instead of one person, we now have just a whole horde of us, and we're out there doing stuff and proven that we don't have to tell the stories that the market or the critical establishment wants us to tell. We don't have to do things coming out of the oral tradition. We don't have to always be dropping tidbits of our language in. We don't have to be dealing with the politics of identity or with repatriation or history, massacres. We can just tell fun stories about elves, about Spider-Man, about whatever we want to, and I don't think we're going away either. I think there's more and more of us coming up. I actually feel like I'm kind of part of the older generation who will probably be eclipsed soon, as it should be.
Wow. It's also really cool to see, the voice actors that are chosen for some of your books, at least. Charlotte Flight, where she did the Backbone of the World, and she's just terrific in that. And Sean Taylor Corbett, I believe I'm getting his name right, who did The Only Good Indians. Yeah. And then
I think it was the first Blackfeet novel voice acted by a Blackfeet themselves.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and it's great to see. I just kind of get the sense that you're helping to build up that whole talent base.
Hopefully, man. I do, like, what you want to do when you wander into the house of fiction is work on it and make it strong so it can last through the generations. And that's what I'm trying to do. I want to make it better and better, but part of that is not being an idiot myself and messing up in some way that, like, erases everything I've done and messes up the road for other people,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Last couple of questions here. I have a literary mystery related to a dedication. Your novel, pull this up here. Your novel, It Came from Del Rio, published in 2010, was dedicated to Jory Gray. The ebook collection of The Ones That Got Away, also published in 2010, is dedicated to Jory Gray. Now, the print edition was dedicated to Detective Bruiseman. Both are characters in the novels Gospel of Z and Not for Nothing, respectively. Neither of these books would even be published until 2014. So they're dedicated to fictional characters who I don't think would see the light of day for at least 4 years. Can you shed any light on this strange occurrence here?
It happens in more books than that. A lot of my books have a secondary dedication to one of my characters. Sometimes it's an existing character, sometimes it's a character who has not been published yet. And actually, sometimes I think I've dedicated one or two novels to June Morrissey from Louise Erdrich's Love Medicine, because she's one of my favorite characters in the whole world.
Oh, wow.
But the reason that Jory Gray ended up in both those books is because I didn't think anyone was ever going to publish Del Rio, because it's a bunny-headed zombie novel set down on the border, and I mean, it's a weird book, for sure.
That's great. I love that artwork there.
Oh, that's one of my that's my second favorite cover I've ever had. I think it's beautiful.
It's amazing.
Yeah. But so I had like when I finished it, I went back into the dedication, and I'd already written Gospel of Z, and I didn't think anybody was going to publish it either, but I wanted to still have Jory Gray see the light of day in some way. So I dedicated that book to him. And then Prime Books got Sean Wallace at Prime Books got hold of me and wanted to do a collection. And so I dedicated that to Jory Gray, because I thought I've got to get him on the shelf somehow. But then after it was coming out, then Trapdoor Books here in Colorado, who doesn't exist anymore, they got hold of me and said, we want to publish a novel. And so I gave them that. But I have a rule about dedications that once I do a dedication, I can't change it, or else something bad will happen to that person. It's a superstition. And
oh, wow.
And even though Jory Gray's not real, I still couldn't change it. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. So that's why it ended up kind of doubling up for Jory,
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you. And the last thing I'll ask you for is, can you tell, I've heard you talk about it one other time, and it's amazing to me, the story about wrestling a steer to the ground.
Yeah, I was at basketball practice my sophomore year in high school, and just, do running baselines, whatever we were doing, I'm all sweaty. And then somebody crashes the door open at the end of the gym and says, Steven, come here. And so I had to go with them. And I had steers back then. One of my steers had broke loose, and it was running all over the countryside, causing all kinds of havoc. Your steer is supposed to be a show steer. It's supposed to be like quite tame and nice. My steers were never tame and nice. They were always like destructive. They were like the Tasmanian devil, and so I jumped in my truck, raced home. I was only about 2 miles from the school, and sure enough, I could see a cloud of dust out there. My steer just causing all kinds of havoc, and so I ran out into what I thought its path was going to be, and sure enough, it thundered past me. And I took a couple of loping steps, still in my basketball clothes, and I reached out, I dove out, and I grabbed onto its tail, and it drugged me for probably 15 minutes. And we went through so many fences and across so many people's properties. We lived in the country. And so there would be like a half mile between each house. And we went through a lot of yards and tore up a lot of stuff. And I was bleeding and everything. And but finally that steer got tired of dragging me. I was extra weight and it stood still. And then I was able to lead it back to water, because that's what it wanted worst. And but to me, that's what writing always is like, people ask me, how do you get inspired or for novels? And I never feel inspired. I feel compelled, really. But what I do is I just stand around in my head, and things are rushing past me. And sometimes I'll see something coming like a dim form through the darkness. I'll hear it. And if I get my steps just right, I can jump out and grab onto its tail, and I can ride whatever that is, that novel, for until it throws me, until I roll off into the grass and the thorns and everything. And that's a novel, So I don't like try to use muscles or luck or anything to write novels. I just like wait around until I can time it right to grab onto one of these ideas jamming past,
That's amazing. Well, thank you for spending so much time with me on this call. I really appreciate it. Just want to remind everybody, Earth Divers is a continuing comic book. Be sure to pick that up at your local comic book shop. You can look for Steven's Slasher Nation column, regular column in Fangoria. And right around the time this is released, it will be near the release date of Don't Fear the Reaper. I think I enjoyed it even more than My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Well, yeah, no, Reaper, it was really fun to write. I wrote it in, 10 weeks, I guess. I think it took 10 weeks to write. It would have taken 8 weeks, but I had some script work I had to stop and do. But the trick with a trilogy, writing a trilogy, is you realize that the first book is Act 1, the second book is Act 2, the third book is Act 3, and the first act of stories are where you lay down the world and get all that, the characters introduced and all that stuff, and so by the time I got to Don't Fear the Reaper, the world and the characters were already there. Those of them who survived Chainsaw, which is not many of them, you know.
That's
And,
right. That's right.
and so I didn't have to slow down to do that, which was wonderful. And so I could just hit the ground running, and there's bodies just falling left and right from the get-go and every
Yeah.
which way, you know. And it was so fun. It was so fun to go fast, you know. I like that
Yes.
a lot. And also I think my best storytelling in novels happens like in Don't Fear the Reaper or Flesh Boy or The Long Trial of Nolan Dugatti, where I can tell a story over like a day or a single shift
Yes.
I
Yes.
do really best in that. And the reason for that is because I'm the worst at keeping timelines straight. I'm also the worst at keeping family lines straight. I don't care about that stuff. I just like, I say it's Thursday, who cares? And so what if it was Saturday yesterday? I don't care about that stuff. Editors and copy editors always drag me across the coals and make me get that stuff right. But it is,
Yes.
I'm like kicking and screaming the whole way because that does not matter to me remotely. I don't care who's cousin and how they're related. I just say cousin, I say uncle, and I don't think I mean the same thing other people mean when they say it. Because like for Growing Up Dead in Texas, my editor had to make a family tree and show me that
Yes.
I had people all in the wrong generations and stuff. And I was like, come on, can't we just kill them all and tell an easier story? You know, and also with timelines, I'm the worst with timelines. I just do not like keeping stuff in order. That drives me crazy. But I'm glad I have copy editors and editors to make
Yes.
it straight, you know, because there are
That's
readers
right.
who care about that stuff too.
Yeah, I guess the worst case scenario is some little break in a timeline or a lineage or something, maybe a distraction, I guess, to an attentive
Yeah.
reader. And God bless them for being attentive,
Yeah.
but it's really not the point of
Yeah.
the narrative.
Yeah.
But it can be distracting, I
Yeah,
guess.
I'm so much more interested in the emotional interiors of these characters and how
Yeah.
that drives their decisions and their what they say and do and everything. That's fascinating to me. But I mean, I understand that having a consistent timeline and like a map of the world and all that kind of stuff, it makes for a real place for these characters to be in. I mean, I understand like mechanically how it works,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I like to do it. I do not like
Yes.
to do it.
Is there anything else we need to be looking for from you coming up in 2023?
Yes, but I can't say it hasn't been announced yet. So
Very good. Very
it might
good.
be announced by the time this podcast drops. I don't know.
Well, everyone be sure to follow Stephen on Twitter at SGJ 72, and where he's very active, and not only is Stephen active, but his readers are very active, and you got a great group of readers who love talking about your work, and it's really great to see people advocating for artists that they care about. I love to see that.
No, it's such an honor to be in a community with them, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been terrific.
Man, it's been great. Thanks.